very good evening and a warm welcome to State of Business on our television. I'm Savindri Jayawardena. Let's look at the top stories for the day. Land price index records an increase compared to 2018, says the central bank reports. Central Bank Governor shares expertise on promoting export sector of Sri Lanka. News in detail. Statistics Department of the Central Bank issuing its weekly economic indicators last Friday said that the year-on-year Colombo Consumer Price Index headline inflation increased to 3.4% in August this year from 3.3% in last month. The data shows that the month-on-month basis CCPI increased by 0.1% in August this year. In the real sector, crude oil prices largely showed an increasing trend. Price increase was mainly supported by the sharp drop of U.S. crude stockpiles and expectation of signing a trade deal between the U.S. and China. Overall, Brent and WTI prices significantly increased by $2.4 per barrel and $3.2 per barrel respectively within the period. In the monetary sector, the reserve money decreased compared to the previous week, mainly due to the decrease in currency in circulation and deposits held by commercial banks with the central bank. The total outstanding market liquidity was a deficit of 24.237 billion rupees by end of the week compared to a deficit of 9.146 billion rupees by the end of last week. By the 30th of August, the all-share price index decreased by 0.15% to 5,899.9 points, and the S&P SL20 index increased by 0.19% to 2,908.4 points compared to the previous week. During the year up to the 30th August, the Sri Lanka rupee appreciated against the US dollar by 1.1%. Given the cross-currency exchange rate movements, the Sri Lanka rupee appreciated against the pound sterling by 5.3%, the euro by 4.7%, and the Indian rupee by 3.7%, while depreciated against Japanese yen by 2.5% during this period. The gross official reserves were estimated at $8,347.1 million US dollars as at the 31st of July this year. Central Bank of Sri Lanka issuing the land price index for Colombo district today said that the land price index for Colombo district reached 132.2 during the first half of 2019, recording an increase of 13.6% compared to the first half of 2018. The three sub-indices which are used in the land price index are residential, commercial and industrial, and industrial LPI recorded the highest year-on-year increase of 14.9%, while the commercial LPI and residential LPI increased by 13.2% and 12.8% respectively. Meanwhile, the land price index increased by 5.1% from second half of 2018 to first half of 2019. The Statistics Department of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka compiles LPI since 1998, covering 5 divisional secretariat divisions in the Colombo district. And with the recent developments in the real estate sector, the Statistics Department expanded the geographical coverage of LPI to cover all DS divisions in the Colombo and revised its base period to first half of 2017. The new series of LPI with expanded coverage and revised base period continues biannually since 2017. Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy emphasizes that leveraging on the export sector is the key to drive for long-term and sustainable growth of the economy in Sri Lanka. Speaking to our television, Governor elaborated that the historical strategies of anti-export bias in economy and protectionism are not applicable to the current globalized society.
When you have a population of 21 million, with purchasing power of per capita income of about a little over 4,000 US dollars, you can't drive growth on a sustained basis by relying more on the domestic market. Exports, external demand. Exports have to be a key part of the narrative in terms of driving growth on a medium to long-term basis. So that is where we should put our efforts. Historically, we've had an anti-export bias in our policy mix. Our exchange rate has tended to be overvalued, and whereby we subsidize foreign producers at the expense of our own producers through the exchange rate. Effective protection is very high, which tends to take money away from the tradable goods sector to non-tradables. And productivity growth over the last 30 years has been only 1% per annum, which is, quite frankly, I would go as far as say appallingly low. So that has been poor. So you see, in a globalized economy, there is a very high premium on competitiveness. So if your productivity growth is so low, and you're a 20 million economy and you are dependent on external demand, exports that is, that equation does not work. You can't have sustained growth, good quality growth.
Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, also stressed that the policy framework for the export transformation in Sri Lanka should be directed to wipe out the para-tariffs.
We have to take away these para-tariffs that we have. You know, in the modern world, you have these cross-border production sharing networks, these supply chains. The most dynamic component of the international trading system is intra-firm trade in Asia. That is the supply chains of these Asian firms. Now, Japanese firms, Chinese firms, ASEAN firms, etc. So, in this modern production sharing network scenario, the distinction between exports and imports gets blurred. You basically bring something in, do your little bit and send it out. Now, if you put a para-tariff in the middle of that, you become uncompetitive. So we have too many para-tariffs. So we have basically excluded ourselves from the most dynamic component of the international trading system by having these series of para-tariffs. So the exchange rate is a problem. Overall effective protection also militates against producing competitive sectors which can sell abroad, because protection reduces competition, reduces your capacity to drive costs down and be competitive externally.
Stay tuned for more news after this break. Welcome back after the break. The Colombo Stock Exchange, in consultation with the Securities and Exchange Commission of Sri Lanka, proposes to review the regulatory structure of the initial listing of shares on the CSE. This attempt is aimed at broadening the CSE listing rules to complement Sri Lanka's rapidly developing commercial background, containing multiple new business models and segments. The CSE is currently exploring revisions on the eligibility criteria for initial listing of shares on the main board and Dirisavi board, initial public offering timelines, and the basis of allotting shares. To facilitate this process, the CSE has taken the views of the industry experts and the regulations and practices of stock exchanges around the world into consideration. In terms of the main board, the proposed amendments to the initial listing rules would offer companies looking to list on the CSE an alternative to the 3 consecutive financial year net profit after tax requirement, which is currently applicable. Changes in the initial public offering process have also been proposed to offer the issuers flexibility in the IPO process. These revisions are set to offer the issuers greater flexibility in terms of timing a listing and attaining an optimum price for an issue. Now we have Governor of the Central Bank of Sri Lanka, Dr. Indrajit Kumaraswamy, delivering some measures to solve the issues related to borrowing in Sri Lanka.
One thing, of course, is to increase the price of money, to increase interest rates. The extreme situation is to have credit ceilings, which we did in 2012. When we had a very severe balance of payments crisis, we wanted to reduce credit and we put an actual ceiling on credit. That is going too far. We don't need that. We're nowhere near that situation. What you can do is essentially 2 things. One is moral suasion, clearly. You get the message out to banks, non-bank financial institutions. You can try to improve financial literacy and awareness amongst the population. These are all things one can do in terms of moral suasion. The other thing, of course, is using interest rates as an instrument.
Sri Lanka Export Development Board held its 20th Exporters Forum this morning at the EDB Auditorium under the patronage of Deputy Minister of Development Strategies and International Trade, Nalin Bandara. The EDB's 20th Exporters Forum took up 17 issues for the discussion relating to operational and policy-level matters in connection with cross-border trade. Most of the issues presented at the forum revolved around matters pertaining to custom duties, corporate tax, cess, and the VAT system. The forum was attended by representatives from a cross-section of private sector companies, while the officials of the BOI, Industrial Technological Institute, the Department of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, Sri Lanka Customs, Inland Revenue Department, Ceylon Electricity Board, and Geological Survey and Mines Bureau took part from the public sector. The EDB's Exporters Forum is held once every 2 months and provides a common platform to discuss and resolve the issues faced by the exporter community in Sri Lanka in order to facilitate exporters to overcome constraints arising from policy and operational issues created by various institutes that regulate, operate, and facilitate cross-border trade. Minister Nalin Bandara, EDB Chairperson and Chief Executive Officer Indira Malwatta, EDB Director General Jeevani Sirivardhana assisted the exporters with solutions and ways and means to sort out their issues. Sri Lanka has sought expertise in preventing violent extremism from the Global Community Engagement and Resilience Fund in the post-Easter Sunday situation where violent extremism became a bigger threat to national security. At the invitation of the Foreign Ministry, the Executive Director of Global Community Engagement and Resilience Fund, Dr. Khalid Koza, was in Sri Lanka and met with political leaders, senior officials, and other stakeholders with a view to ascertain possible programs for Global Community Engagement and Resilience Fund assistance. During the meeting with Dr. Koza, Foreign Minister Tilak Marapana highlighted the value of community policing where extreme elements must be identified and dealt with at the early stage of radicalization. At an interactive dialogue with relevant government stakeholders at the Defence Ministry, co-chaired by Defence Secretary Shanta Kottegoda and Foreign Secretary Ravinatha Arisinghe, the Defence Secretary noted that the security forces and police were able to bring the situation swiftly under control after April 21st incident and arrest suspects who could have carried out a second wave of attacks, and that now it is time to address those in detention to prevent further radicalization and put in place an effective de-radicalization program. Meanwhile, Secretary Arisinghe said that any eliminating violent extremism measure should be tailor-made to suit the local context as situations differ from country to country and adopt a whole-of-government approach. Stay tuned for stock updates after this break. Welcome back after the break. Trading at Colombo Stock Exchange ended on a mixed note today. The all-share price index gained 5.13 points to close at 5,883.42 and S&P SL20 dropped 1.29 points to close at 2,887.05. The turnover was 799 million rupees and over 92 million shares were traded. Up next are Forex trades. That's all news for today. Do join us tomorrow with State of Business. Until then, take care. Good night.